Climate change is this incredible problem that's affecting everybody on the planet at the same time, and we have to find a solution to it. I'm Matt Russell, and for the last year and a half, I've been leading Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. We are a state affiliate of the National Interfaith Power and Light movement, and we've been looking at how do we get farmers to be part of the climate solution. I think most people recognize that farmers are causing some of the problems with climate change and that farmers are victims of a changing climate. But what we're really doing is inviting farmers from their faith and their values to come into this moment and figure out how they can help solve the problem with their farms. And why we developed this program in the first place was because I knew there were a lot more farmers in Iowa ready to engage in climate action than people thought. To mitigate climate change, there's a lot of things that farmers can do, and really what we're doing is we're taking that greenhouse gas pollution out of the atmosphere, particularly carbon, we're pulling it down and using our agricultural systems to put it back into the ground where it becomes a resource, and we can then grow more when the carbon's there and we get rid of the carbon up in the atmosphere where it's doing harm.
We've been farming here for about 150 years, so the farm has changed. We had a lot of diversity on the farm for the vast majority of that time. As we got later and later in the last century, the economic decisions made it so that our farm became less diverse, almost exclusively corn and soybeans. So we've tried to introduce things like cover crops, no-till, extended rotations. Those not only help your own field, but they help the entire system and help those larger issues like climate change.
The huge demand that is unmet is environmental services, and there are a lot of people starting to get really interested in that, from university researchers to farmers to politicians and agribusiness folks. There's a lot of interest in how do we farm in a way that benefits the environment. So another great crop that's a new crop is miscanthus. We can add that to the mix.
This is an Iowa State University research farm actually dedicated to sustainable advanced bioeconomy research. You know, how do these crops get changed by climate change? But how are these crops also changing the story? So I wanted to show you this eddy covariance tower that we put up. We're measuring the carbon dioxide and the water vapor that's going into or coming off of this field all year round.
And so this is the kind of research that would help me decide what I want to plant on my farm, like what rotations and stuff. I mean,
absolutely. So what we do here is we're using measurements of wind speed to calculate how much carbon dioxide left this field or how much was taken up from this field. So this is really the gold standard way of understanding if a farming practice is a source or a sink of carbon dioxide. Today we are digging about 40 holes to monitor water quality under giant grass. We are putting in little discs that measure the nitrate. They're both labeled?
Should be.
Okay. We grow a lot of corn and soybeans here, but they're only on the ground for about 6 months out of the year. And the rest of the time, this rich black soil has a lot of nitrogen in it, and it washes away in our winter snows and our spring rains. And if we can do something different to this land, and for example, putting a perennial on it, it helps capture that nitrogen before it can leave the field. So what we're really trying to understand here is how much of that nitrogen this field can capture.
Yeah, this is my first time in miscanthus. Miscanthus, I can't even say it.
Yeah, this is giant miscanthus. There's lots of different types of miscanthus, and this grass is really good at taking carbon dioxide out of the air and storing it in plant biomass. You can burn this instead of coal to use for heat, but you can also turn it into a liquid fuel if you want, using some of the same approaches that we've tried with corn stalks, for example. But it really makes a nice building material as roofing.
So what's it doing in the soil? Like, you told me what's like all this, but what's happening in the soil?
The fun thing about this plant is the same amount of biomass you see above ground is also produced below ground every year.
It's like a tree, but it's grass.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It's a cane, so it is woody. And if we're trying to scrub carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, I want to use a crop that can scrub as much of it as possible. So that's miscanthus so far in my research.
So what I always talk about is we have to think about carbon farming like we think about food farming.
Yeah.
It didn't just happen, we figured it out.
That's
and when
right.
we apply 10,000 years of agriculture to carbon farming, this is the kind of thing we do, and we actually accelerate how nature would cycle carbon.
Yeah.
Bless what's coming out of this, that it is enough that our farmers around the world will be able to help solve the biggest environmental problems we face. I grew up on a farm, I am a farmer, and I did study to be a Catholic priest years ago. I didn't finish that course of study and I was not ordained, but I very much have that sense of how can I use all of that to help make the world a better place. That's really part of who I am as a spiritual person. You should be okay. Making major changes, but not radical, just significant changes on all the farms across the Midwest. It could have an enormous impact. It's the equivalent of taking millions and millions of cars off the road. Hey, Justin, how you doing?
Matt, I'm doing well, doing well.
Good to see you.
Yes, on this nice, snowy, cold October morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Normally, we'd have a nice, bright green field right now, but because of the below normal temperatures this October, this rye is just in the verge of popping up out of the ground.
Right. What are the list of conservation things you put in your operation here?
Cover crops. I've also done terraces and waterways, a long list. And I'm very lucky to have the NRCS office that has so many programs for me to pick from.
And when I look at your pollinator habitat, which is in the Conservation Reserve Program, so you're getting a payment from the government, basically renting this from you.
Yes.
These are your poor doing soils, right? I mean, this is creating a little bit of revenue where you wouldn't necessarily have your highest productivity, right?
That helps. So that gives me a dependable paycheck from year to year.
If you had a federal program that would specifically reward you or challenge you to innovate around climate mitigation, is that something you'd be interested in?
Most definitely, because we as farmers are suffering the repercussions of climate change. I want to make sure that we are doing what we can to mitigate climate change so that my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids can farm this farm.
When we provide an economic incentive that allows them to make some money doing the right thing, it builds the resilience of that farm over a longer period of time.
Angel, you're gonna get in trouble.
So when you're in a business with small margins and high risk, when you can add a new revenue stream that lowers your risk and that diversifies your income streams, then it's a win-win. And if doing that, you are helping solve one of the biggest problems in the world, it's not just a win for farmers, it's a win for the whole world.